Good luck, yeah.
We're here for you.
Yeah, I should have the camera. No, there is no service on June 26th. So that'll work out there. A little better.
And I don't have goats right now either.
Well, you better get
Well, if I can leave my your place, I'll buy you a herder. No problem. When and where?
how many
A whole lot. Oh yeah, Peterson's got some. No, well they melted for quite a while. They did. She had big ones.
Make me feel guilty now.
That wasn't my point, Reggie. I just asked him.
Sit me over all by myself now. Well,
You going to vote now?
I'm gonna go sit beside my brother. I'm going to the back row for that.
Turning that off a little bit, got yeah. Short a few bulbs, so it looks like. It's all right today. All right, we are starting a new series today. It's going to be kind of our summer series. It's from Dr. David Jeremiah. I never thought I'd see the day. And I don't know how many listen to him on the radio on a regular basis. Probably a few, yeah. So you've heard this before then. And so we're going to go through it. And what we hope to really get out of this is not only, what's going on, but what can we do about it? Are we just supposed to throw our hands up and say it's out of our control? Or is there something we can do? I think the world is hungry for answers, but they're, as you're going to see in this first part, everybody seems to be a little bit uptight about religion right now. And so we need to be on our guard and figure out what's going on. So as we study this, it's going to be a different format than you're used to. I'm not sure how it's going to go, to be honest, but we're going to give it a shot. Might have to tweak a few things as we go along here. But I thought we'd do a little bit of the video. The videos are generally, about 45 minutes long, I think, each one, or somewhere in that area. And I really don't want to go through the whole video, So there's a study guide with it. It's got some questions in it, so we're going to, about halfway through, I think, or so, I'm going to go through about half the questions. And so we'll see how that goes. And I'd be open to input here and really how to do this. But for now, we're going to open with prayer here, and then we'll view a little bit of the video. So, Pastor, do you open us this morning and just.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather as your people, Lord, to begin this new series. We just pray that you will be with us as we watch this video, as we interact, Lord. They'll just be challenging and uplifting to each and every one of us, Lord. Be with Wayne as he leads, and as we just kind of tweak this together and just find the best way to be able to be inputted in this way, Lord. We just again thank you for your servant, for Dr. Jeremiah. Lord, as we view these things, Lord, may you be brought honor and glory. Pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, I got a question for you before we watch this first segment. It's a little skit. It's two parts to the skit. And if you were to try to change the United States or even the world, what would your plan be? If you really wanted to mess it up, how would you do it?
Well, it's pretty hard to mess it up.
It can't get any worse?
Start over in Washington?
Yeah.
We'd have to throw out all political correctness right off the bat.
Okay. Okay, so you want to turn it back the best way. You're
Start with the youth.
Start with the youth.
Yeah, they're our future.
Okay.
I agree with 100%. You have to start with the young people. Us old guys aren't going to change it anymore.
Okay. Well, they come up with a little interesting skit on based on 1962 Company. So we'll watch that first here.
I can assure you that the men gathered around this table are the best in advertising.
And Wyndham Ridgestone accounts are listed among the top brands in the world.
Our creative department, led by Kent Daniels, is the finest anywhere.
Now tell us, what is it you want done?
I want to influence the behavior of people toward a liberal mindset, resulting in a moral shift in the American culture. I need your firm to create campaigns targeting 10 significant social and religious issues.
So, you're not selling anything?
No.
Well, then to what end do you want these ad campaigns designed?
To see our culture so swayed by each campaign that gradually and unknowingly people embrace my plan for moral change.
You mean immoral change?
You mentioned 10 significant issues. What issues are we dealing with here?
In brief, to distance ourselves from Israel, become more dependent on oil from the Middle East. I want to make the institution of marriage obsolete, expand the boundaries of morality, embrace atheism, question the theology of the church, the accuracy of the Bible, and the divinity of Jesus Christ.
Is that all?
No, but we'll start there.
That's quite a tall order, Mr.
Our client wishes to remain nameless.
Swell.
My name is not important, but the effectiveness of your work is. I will not tolerate any compromise in the outcome of this venture.
Sir, we're flattered you chose Wyndham Ridgestone to create these unique campaigns, but...
I have unlimited financial resources and great power. I operate from behind the scenes, but I'm very influential throughout this world. It would not be wise for you to turn me down. I will not take no for an answer.
You're quite an intimidating individual. And although I'm intrigued by you and the income you would bring to this firm, I don't believe that anyone around this table thinks we'll ever see the day when society embraces such outrageous proposals.
Create the campaigns. I will do the rest. So, do you understand what I want?
We create 10 dazzling campaigns that will entice a downward spiral in the cultural, political, and spiritual values in America.
And perhaps the world.
And one day, it may all come together just as I've planned.
Wyndham Ridgestone, accepts the account.
Shall we begin?
Now?
Yes. Be a dear and distribute these.
Yes, sir.
This is quite unconventional. We usually draw up a contract before we begin working on an account.
No need to be concerned. My wealth is limitless, and I know where to find each of you. Let's proceed.
Certainly.
Okay, well, you have 10 topics listed here. Where would you like to start?
At the top, I would like our culture to consider the possibility that there is no God.
Atheism.
In a word, yes.
Sir, we live in a nation founded on godly principles. I doubt that people will ever embrace atheism.
I heard you were good. Now prove it.
Look, this campaign and the ones that follow, they need to be subtle.
Positive in nature, but negative in result.
So we don't use the word atheism.
That's too strong. Controversial.
Instead, we talk science, nature.
Evolution.
No. Human development.
Scientists deal with facts.
And theologians with faith.
So we blur the line between fact and faith.
That's right, that's right. Opening your mind doesn't mean closing off your heart.
There's a place for both.
Perhaps we put a face on this campaign. A kid, an elderly person, or an animal.
Right. Well, who can resist the charm of a cute little animal?
No one likes an atheist. Everyone loves nature, no matter the origin. Who knows how we got here? Who really knows who's up there? So look inward, not upward.
I think we have our first campaign.
And now, here is the host of Turning Point, Dr. David Jeremiah.
Hello, I'm...
So as you see, their plan, as portrayed there, is kind of what's happening, isn't it? It's kind of odd that, you know, this was put out in 2011 or 12, and they come up with this ape, and now, you know, this story about in the zoo where it seems like animals have taken priority over people, even, you know, more than just that case. But so, what did you get out of that, though? That is really probably an important piece of this picture of what the world is right now.
It doesn't come in at one time, bang. You just gradually work your way into it.
Okay.
And your tolerance levels work with it, and you just gradually, you accept just a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, and like it said, 62, if you think back in 1962, we would have thrown out every politician we have if they'd even come up with stuff that we have nowadays.
Okay. Anything else there, Mike?
It's just the subtleties of things. That's how Satan works too.
Yeah.
You know, it just works a wedge in. This isn't so bad. This isn't so bad. Pretty soon you're accepting things you never would have.
Okay. What about the person who is bringing it up? You know,
That's Satan himself.
yeah, yeah. And that is really who we're really fighting, isn't it? You know, I think we tend to forget that, you know, our fight is with him, Ephesians 6. You know, it's not against flesh and blood, but the rulers of the air, you know, the powers that are Satan's. So, you know, as we go through this first thing on atheism here, you know, we do have to remind ourselves of where the battle is really at. Okay, there's like 7 parts to this. This first one is when atheists would be angry. That's our today's and probably next week's lesson. When Christians wouldn't know they were in a war. When Jesus would be so profaned. When marriage would be obsolete. When morality would be in free fall. When the Bible would be marginalized. And when the church would be irrelevant. So that is the series. So we're going to look at the video for a little bit here, and we're not going to go through the whole thing. And like I said, we'll start with some questions. So we'll let Dr. Jeremiah. I think we're going to go for just that first story and stop again for a minute. Okay.
It was May 15th in 2007, and Jerry Falwell, one of our generation's leading evangelicals, died. On CNN, anchor Anderson Cooper asked the outspoken atheist Christopher Hitchens for his reaction to Falwell's death. Here is the transcript of this interview. Cooper, I'm not sure you believe in heaven, but if you do you think Jerry Falwell is in it? Hitchens, no, and I think it's a pity that there isn't a hell for him to go to. Cooper, what is it about him that brings up such vitriol? Hitchens, the empty life of this ugly little charlatan proves only one thing, that you can get away with the most extraordinary offenses to morality and to truth in this country if you will just get yourself called Reverend. Cooper, whether you agree or not with his reading of the Bible, you don't think he was sincere in what he spoke? Hitchens, no, I think he was a conscious charlatan and bully and fraud. And I think if he read the Bible at all, and I would doubt that he could really actually read any long book at all, that he did so only in the most hucksterish and, as we say, Bible-pounding way. End of quote. Apologist Dinesh D'Souza has written, a group of prominent atheists, many of them evolutionary biologists, has launched a public attack on religion in general and Christianity in particular, and they have no interest at all in being nice. A Christianity Today editorial makes it attempt to explain this new intolerance. It says you can tell that atheism is in trouble because it is becoming increasingly intolerant. In the past, atheists were often condescendingly tolerant of their less enlightened fellow citizens. While they disdained religion, they treated their religious neighbors as good-hearted, even if they were misguided. But now, key activists are urging a less civil approach. At a recent forum sponsored by the Science Network at the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, the tone of intolerance reached such a peak that anthropologist Melvin Connor commented, the viewpoints have run the gamut from A to B. Should we bash religion with the crowbar or only with the baseball bat? In the preface to Anthony Flou's book, There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind, Abraham Varghese describes this new atheism as a look back in anger, take no prisoners type of atheism. The irony of the new atheist anger is captured in a little article I read in my research for this message called When Atheists Are Angry at God. The writer says, I have shaken my fist in anger at stalled cars, storm clouds, and incompetent meteorologists. I've even on one terrible day that included a dead alternator, a blaring tornado warning siren, and a horribly wrong weather forecast, cursed all three of them at once. I have fumed at furniture, cursed at crossing guards, and held a grudge against Gun Barrel City, Texas. I've been mad at just about anything you can imagine, except unicorns. I have never been angry at unicorns. It's unlikely you've ever been angry at unicorns either. We've become incensed by objects and creations, both animate and inanimate. We can even, in a limited sense, be bothered by fanciful characters in books and dreams. But creatures like unicorns that don't exist, that we truly believe not to exist, tend not to raise our ire. We certainly don't blame the one-horned creatures for our problems. But the one social group that takes exception to this rule are the atheists. They claim to believe that God does not exist, and yet, according to empirical studies, they tend to be the people that are most angry at him. When we speak of the anger of the atheists, we're not talking primarily about the classic atheists like Bertrand Russell. No, the atheists we are talking about are the new atheists. The term new atheism was first used by Wired magazine in November of 2006 to describe the atheism that was espoused in books by men like Daniel Dennett, who wrote Breaking the Spell, Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, Lewis Wolpert's 6 Impossible Things Before Breakfast, Victor Stenger's The Comprehensible Cosmos, Sam Harris's The End of Faith, and Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great, Why Religion Poisons Everything. Why such anger? How can people be so angry with God if they don't even believe he exists? And why would the most angry among them be the leaders of the pack, the prominent new atheists themselves? The rest of this sermon is an attempt to answer that question. Without the ability to see into the hearts of the leaders of this new atheism, there are some issues that seem to be contributing to their anger. First of all, their arrogance is diminishing them. I read a story this week.
Part now we're looking at what people are looking at prominent religion. You know, like he brought up Jerry Falwell's death and what the atheists said about that. So if we are listening to him, you know, what is he saying about people in general? I mean, he knocks Jerry Falwell, right? But what's he saying about himself? Jerry Falwell had, you know, a great ministry. It's very hard to listen to what he said, you know, because he was a good man and helped a lot of people. So when you know who Jerry Falwell was, and then what this guy says, you know, what's he trying to say? What's he really doing to himself if you listen to him? If people would just stop and listen a little bit. Wasn't he the one that was angry? He's the one that had all the answers. He's the one who thought everybody else was wrong and he's right, you know. You'd have to put a red flag up right away to somebody like that. But since 2012, you know, it's not just atheists that are so angry. I thought this is kind of ironic, just about, I think it was on Monday, this guy I work with that we talk a little bit, he's a younger guy. I asked him how his weekend was, and right away he jumps on me a little bit, and he says, I actually don't know how it started, but he got going, you know, why doesn't God just show himself? If he could just show up, you know, and he was swearing the whole time, if he would just make himself visible, if he would just come back, is he too busy? Is he too big of a guy to show up, you know, why doesn't he just prove that he's there? Then maybe I would listen to him. I said, maybe, you know. I said, he's tried that before, and we actually killed him. But his rant went on for a while about why doesn't God show up? And the atheists have that same attitude, I think. So it's not just the atheists anymore. Now, this guy is not, what I would say, an atheist, and you hear this from all over, like our school system. We can't have Christian anything in the school. Well, why not? You know, I mean, they're not atheists in the school, but like the account, there is a bigger picture behind this, isn't there? So when the one argument I'd have against this is it's really not atheists that are our whole problem. It is society and how that has become totally against Christianity. So we're going to watch the rest of this, or not the rest of it, a few more things, and we'll do some questions here.
About 4 friends in Washington, D.C. who assembled on a sunny day on the Mall to discuss some big questions and then vote on which answer was right. 3 of the 4 were atheists, and the 4, Chris, grew weary of being outvoted each time. So he appealed to God, "Lord, please give a sign that you exist." And suddenly, a bolt of lightning hit the Washington Monument. "See," Chris said, but the 3 atheists insisted that natural causes could explain that occurrence. So Chris prayed again, and this time the earth shook, and a voice from heaven boomed, "He's right." Chris triumphantly said, "Now do you get it?" And one of the atheists shrugged, "Well, now it's just 3-2. And you get the impression that God is no more important than just whoever else happens to be in the debate. In her satire, The Loser Letters, Mary Eberstadt makes the new atheism seem easy to mock. At the launch of her book in 2010, she explains why she takes on the new atheist. She says, "Their movement has repeatedly assailed religious people as self-righteous, ignorant of history, and humorless, all the while remaining themselves self-righteous, ignorant of history, and humorless." And if you've read any of these books I've mentioned, you know it's hard to read their books or watch their interviews without coming to the conclusion that the new atheists think they are a lot smarter than the rest of us, and especially the rest of us who happen to be Christians. In the past, there was an attempt to mask their arrogance, and now they flaunt it. Back in 2003, Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins decided that atheist needed a less offensive name. The term chosen to spruce up atheism was the term bright. A bright was defined as someone who holds a naturalistic worldview, which is free of supernatural and mystical elements. Shortly after the term brights was introduced, Stephen Waldman wrote a response for NPR, the National Public Radio. And this is what he wrote. "I am not sure what image buffers we're aiming for, but the name, the Brights, succinctly conveys the sense that this group thinks it's more intelligent than everyone else. The rest of us must be the Dims." I suppose Daniel Dennett wrote in a recent New York Times op-ed piece, "We Brights don't believe in ghosts or elves or the Easter Bunny or God." Let's put aside the questionable intelligence of trying to improve your image by choosing a title that makes everyone hate you. They might as well have chosen the Smugs or the Smarty Pants. Let's instead examine the substance of their platform. What about their assertion or implication that people who believe in God or the supernatural are just not as, well, bright? In fact, 2 surveys earlier this year, one from Harris and one from Gallup, indicate that supernatural religious beliefs are held not only by most Americans, but by the majority of well-educated Americans. Listen to these numbers. 55% of people with postgraduate degrees, I'm talking about lawyers, doctors, dentists, and the like, 55% of these people believe in the devil. 53% believe in hell, 72% believe in miracles, Remember, these are people with postgraduate educations. 78% of them believe in the survival of the soul after death, and 60% believe in the virgin birth, and 64% believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So don't tell me that you have to be an idiot to be a Christian. That's pretty much what they'd like us to believe. One of the clear messages of the Bible is the danger of pride. Pride was the original sin. It finds its place on God's hate list of Proverbs 6:16. King Solomon warns that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. One of the problems of the new atheist is this: their arrogance is diminishing them. Number two, second problem they have is their advocates are deserting them. Their advocates are deserting them. Let me tell you about a friend that you would become a friend of if you read his book. His name is Antony Flew. Antony Flew, philosopher and former atheist, set the agenda for modern atheism in 1950 with an essay that he wrote called Theology and Falsification. This became the most widely reprinted publication of the last half century, philosophy-wise. Antony Flew has published over 30 books, including God and Philosophy, The Presumption of Atheism, and How to Think Straight. In his 2007 book, There Is a God, Antony Flew discloses how his commitment to follow the argument wherever it leads led him to a belief in God as creator. In clear prose and brief chapters, he explains the 4 lines of evidence that convinced him. And one reviewer of the book described it as a most uncomfortable jolt to those who were once his fellow atheists. The headline when the book came out read like this: Famous atheist now believes in God. One of the world's leading atheists now believes in God, more or less based on scientific evidence. This was the headline of a December 9, 2004 Associated Press story that went on to say, a British philosophy professor who has been a leading champion of atheism for more than a half century has changed his mind. He now believes in God. And the cover of his book tells the whole story. I have it in my office. It has the title, There Is No God, and the word no is stricken out and the word a is put in its place. So the book now says, no longer there is no God, the book says there is a God. And while Antony Flew, who died not long ago, while he, as far as we know, never came to believe in the biblical God of the Bible, he concluded that atheism is not logically sustainable. Let me tell you about another atheist by the name of A.N. Wilson, once thought to be the next C.S. Lewis, who then renounced his faith and spent years mocking Christianity. A.N. Wilson returned to faith, and the reason, he said in an interview with the New Statesman, was that atheists are missing out on some very basic experiences of life. While writing the biography of C.S. Lewis, he noticed similarities between himself and his subject, Lewis, such as a happy childhood, shading in the miserable boarding school years, and a rejection of their boyhood faith on maturity. But another parallel slowly dawned on him. Just as Lewis gradually became aware that his favorite authors were Christians, Wilson noticed a difference between the skeptical and the devout. Attractive and amusing as David Hume was, did he confront the complexities of human existence as deeply as his contemporary Samuel Johnson? And did I feel him as interesting? The perception of his atheist friends seemed rather parochial and flat. Listening to Bach, he said, and reading the works of religious authors, he realized that their worldview or perception of life was deeper and wiser and more rounded than his own. And he turned his back on atheism toward the Creator. Then there's a man by the name of Matthew Paris. His story is a little bit shorter. He was a well-known British atheist. He made the mistake of visiting Christian aid workers in Malawi, where he saw the power of the gospel transforming them and others. and concerned with what he saw, he wrote that it confounds my ideological beliefs, stubbornly refuses to fit my worldview, and has embarrassed my growing belief that there is no God. While Paris is unwilling to follow where his observations lead, he is obviously wrestling with how Christianity makes better sense of the world than atheism. And one of these people that I want to tell you about, I read a whole book about him, and this is a very interesting story. This man's name is Peter Hitchens. Peter Hitchens was never an outspoken advocate for the new atheist. He was an atheist, but his claim to fame is he's the brother of the outspoken new atheist Christopher Hitchens. Peter Hitchens is a British journalist and the author of the 2010 book, The Rage Against God. If you ever get a chance to get that book and read it, you'll find it very interesting. He tells in this book that at the age of 15, he set fire to his Bible on the playing fields of his Cambridge boarding school, and he set out on a life of denying the existence of God. He attributes his return to faith to his experience of socialism in practice, which he witnessed during his years of reporting in Eastern Europe and his nearly 3 years as a resident correspondent in Moscow during the collapse of the Soviet Union. In his book, he describes what it was like for the Russian people who were living under the tyranny of godless communism. Quote, they knew that if they wanted anesthetics at the dentist or antibiotics at the hospital or cooperation from their child's teacher or a holiday by the sea, they would need to bribe someone to get them. In mile after mile of mass-produced housing, you would be hard put to find a single family untouched by divorce, that schools taught lies, that government establishment leaked radiation into the air and water, rats were commonplace, windows were filthy as a matter of course. I never saw a clean one all the time I was there. All of this while the elite had access to good food, foreign travel, and books. This society, promoted by its leaders as an egalitarian utopia, was in truth one of the most unequal societies on earth. Peter Hitchens describes life in Russia in the early 90s as harsh and dangerous. In 1990, there were 6.46 million abortions in the USSR, and there were only 4.85 million live births. For the average citizen in Russia, life was lived at a dismally low level materially, ethnically, and culturally. Here he was espousing the doctrine that had created this social nightmare, and he was caused to live in the middle of it. And while living there and beginning to see the outrageous result of a godless culture, something started to happen in his life that began to turn him back toward his faith. He describes the final experience that brought him back to a belief in God. He was in Dallas, Texas, with a few hours to spare before catching his plane back to Washington, D.C. And he decided to visit the city's Museum of Art. He found himself standing speechless in front of a painting by Thomas Hart Benton. The painting was called The Prodigal Son, but it was a very different prodigal son from the story of the Bible. Benton's prodigal son has arrived home too late. Nobody has seen him from afar off and run joyfully to meet him. There will be no forgiveness, no best robe, no ring, no music, no dancing. Benton's prodigal son stands in his shabby clothes with his poor roped suitcase. A beaten-up car, the last trace of his squandered wealth, is parked in the background. He is gaping with his hand to his mouth at the ruin of the family homestead, ruin that was caused by his own greed and wastefulness. He looks as if he has just dawned on him that he is stupid and cruel and without hope. Instead of a fatted calf, there's a stark white animal skeleton lying in the untended grass. We can guess at the grief and the resignation and the failure that have overtaken the family and its home during this young boy's heedless absence. Who can he blame for it but himself? The desolation is infinite. And Peter Hitchens says, as I surveyed the melancholy remnants of my own church, out of which I had petulantly stomped, I felt the same thing. It was terrible and it was wrong, but what was I to say? Where had I been when I had been needed? That experience crystallized all the other things that had happened in his life. And Peter Hitchens came back to God. The brother of one of the most famous atheists in the world is now a Christian, and his book, The Rage Against God, is primarily an answer to some of the arguments that his atheist brother has put forward. So you got two Hitchens. One's on the right side and one's on the wrong side, and at least they're talking to each other. Who knows what can happen? Atheists are angry because their arrogance is diminishing them. Their advocates are deserting them. And thirdly, they're angry because their arguments are dividing them. One of the favorite...
All right, if you ever have run into this guy in Bismarck holding the sign up that the end is coming, that's one of our own. That's Bill Knox from Washburn here. And not too long ago, a lady came up to him and argued with him and handed him a card. She was a card-carrying atheist. Now, I don't know if there's any card-carrying Christians around here, but the atheists have a card now. But we're going to take a look at a few Bible verses that we can go to for our strength and encouragement when we hear all this. We're going to go to Psalms 19. One through 6. And the problem with most people who argue with you is they don't want to read anything. They would rather just argue and not be informed. Like he said, the atheists found out that non-Christians don't have as much to talk about. They don't have the depth that he wanted, and that's why he turned to Christianity. And that's a very true statement, I think. God gives us a little bit more. He gives us the insight, and the more important things of life come to the surface. So, in Psalms 19 here, let's just read it 1 through 6. Someone want to read that?
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies announce his hands have made. Day after day they tell the story, night after night they tell again. They have no speech or words, and they have no voice to be heard, but their message goes out through all the world. Their words go everywhere on earth, and the sky is like the home for the sun. The sun comes out like a bridegroom from his bedroom. It rejoices like an athlete eager to run a race. The sun rises at one end of the sky and follows as fast to the other end. Nothing hides its heat.
Okay, these are questions right out of his study guide book. So, what do the heavens say? Verse 1 there. What do the heavens declare? Now, when we studied Romans, right? What does it say about people who don't believe? Do they have an excuse? And why don't they have an excuse? Yeah, because creation itself speaks of the glory of God. You can't look at anything without saying, wow, that's quite impossible to make on your own. Somebody had to do it. So this is another part of that. And so the heavens are telling the glory of God, but it goes on to say that what? They don't have to speak. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. But there's no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. So without saying anything, without yelling anything, the heavens are declaring there is a God. I recently read a little bit about there's a difference between astrology and astronomy. And astronomy is a good thing, but they have taken it, and actually way back in when they were on the Shinar plane, they've actually corrupted the astronomy and made it into astrology and what the stars are about. And I got kind of caught up in this a little bit, that, you know, all the signs, there's, some say there's 12 signs, some say there's 13 in their meeting. And I'm just going to show you what they say. You know, they're all the signs that Virgo is the virgin, the story of the virgin birth of Jesus Christ, the promised Messiah. Libra is the scales, the judgment seat of Christ on the cross to pay for the sins of the world and to satisfy the justice of God. Scorpius, the scorpion, Satan, the enemy of Jesus Christ, in hypostatic union, when he became a man who inspired the crucifixion but was defeated at the cross. Sagittarius, the archer, the redeemed victory over Satan at the cross. Capricorn, the goat, the sin offering of Jesus Christ, provided unlimited atonement for the sins of the world and the propitiation of the God the Father. Aquarius, the water man, showers of blessings from heaven from the good news of salvation through faith in Christ. I have a page here. Pisces is the two fish, one pointing toward the pole star and the other toward the ecliptic symbol, symbolize a priest interceding for the believer in the foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. Aries, the ram, Christ the conqueror, commander-in-chief of the resurrected church in heaven during the tribulation. Taurus, the bull, the redeemer, who will return at the second advent to conquer and rule the earth. Gemini, the twins, the story of Esau's attack of Jacob, expanding into the tribulation when Israel's enemies seek to destroy it. Cancer, the crab, eternal security, in Adam all die, even so by agency of Christ shall be made alive. In Leo the lion, the Lord Jesus Christ as a lion, the tribe of Judah, who returns to the millennial and casts the devil into lake of fire. Now there's a whole gospel of the stars that is based on those same signs that we see in astrology. And so the story is that it's corrupted. But do we find any evidence in the Bible that says we should look to the stars for answers? Actually, it's the opposite, right? and we shouldn't. There is really no clear consensus on any of these drawings in the stars. And they mean different things to different people, so the best thing we have is for it to stick to the Word, and we'll talk about that while our time is already up. We'll talk about that some more later. So, what does the firmament reveal in there? It says, in my Bible it says, and their expanse is declaring the works of his hands. But some of you might have firmament. So I looked up firmament, and what does firmament mean? Now, I thought it was the opposite. I thought it was the earth, but it isn't. It actually means the vault of heaven, the sky. So no matter what translation you have, the firmament, the expanse of heaven, the sky is the same thing. So it's the vault of heaven. What does it reveal? It reveals the glory of God, right? Job. Instead of maybe going there, Job 9, 1 through 11, God is arguing with, or Job, I should say, is arguing with God, right? And he's bringing up the Orion's belt and some of the other things in the sky. So they knew about them. They were there, and it's been told that there are signs in the sky. So it's not that they have no use at all, but it still is just declaring the glory of God, not necessarily a message. We see that in a couple different places. If you would go to Job 38:2 and Amos 5:8. But we are out of time for today. So we will come back to that and next week and dig into that a little further. So, yeah.
I guess I look at kind of especially this in Psalms and then what Wes said right away. All of creation declares the glory of God, but yet Satan twists it so instead he convinces people to glorify creation rather than creation glorifying God.
Yeah.
Just something that popped into my head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just like that opening video there, look inward and not upward. We have become a society who thinks we can solve everything. Yeah. So, good. Okay. Again, if you have some input on how to do this differently, feel free to tell me. Thanks for coming this morning.